I'll just say this. If you can't find examples of fascist leaders talking about violence against protesters that way, please, your homework assignment for the weekend, if you so choose to take it, is to find an American president that's ever talked like this. Roll the tape.
But we are very proud of the fact that I called, I said, I'm sorry, we have to have them go in. And they went in, and it was like a knife cutting butter right through. Boom. I'll never forget. You saw the scene on that road, wherever it may be, in the city, Minneapolis.
So, David Ignatius, I'll just, you're going to get the assignment first. Have you ever heard of a sitting American president? Have you ever heard of a major politician in America, a national politician in America, certainly in the last 20, 30 years, glorifying police violence against protesters and saying it was a beautiful thing, it was like a knife cutting through butter?
He just doesn't understand that he is talking about American citizens who, for the most part, were peacefully demonstrating their rights as citizens. He's just so completely out of touch with that. And the thing, Joe, that I find encouraging is that he's out of touch with where most Americans seem to be. The language that he's using, that you sometimes worry animates his base, animates many millions of people, it just doesn't seem to be working this time. I mean, you have NASCAR. I mean, if you know, NASCAR, as traditional an American institution as you could find, saying no more Confederate flags. That's it. We've had it. You have Republicans lining up, say we should rename some of these military bases. It's just not right. I have been interviewing corporate leaders, the president of Microsoft yesterday, the CEO of Salesforce a couple days before that, hearing how they look at their companies and their thousands of workers and they say, we're never going to be the same again. Microsoft's thinking, how do we invent technology that will help citizens hold their police more accountable? We get it. We know that America's changed. You know, in these months, we're a different place. And Donald Trump, in a way that I've never felt, is an outlier. He uses language, as you say, that I can't ever remember a president using language like that. But the point to me more is that other people aren't using it, that he is standing alone. And that should give us some encouragement as we head toward November. This isn't popular. America is in a different place than the president right now.
Republicans aren't, most Republicans are not following the president here. They're calling him out in many cases. Military leaders, rank and file military people are as well. And yes, there is, I can think of no president. I can think of dictators that have glorified violence against protesters, but certainly no American president that's ever done that. And Willie, again, the president's talking about shooting protesters, sicking vicious dogs on black people who are protesting outside of the White House, or if not specifically black people, certainly for a march for black rights, for civil rights, just like Bull Connor did in Birmingham in the 1960s. And now, yesterday, again, at an evangelical church, the president talking about how it was a beautiful thing that police cut through Americans that were protesting like knife through butter. And he said, it might not be beautiful to a lot of people, but it was beautiful to me. That is,
wow.
Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. That seems deeply offensive and un-American. Maybe there have been examples of other presidents have spoken that way about American citizens, but like a knife cutting through butter. It's just, this is a president increasingly isolated, increasingly alone, and I just don't understand. I just don't understand it on so many levels. But again, we've always been told that Donald Trump is playing three-dimensional chess. We've always been told that he understands the electorate better than anybody else. We've always said that he's just got this gut instinct that always gets him over the finish line.
Way off.
I got to say no, and again, no, certainly not in this case.
Yeah, for a guy who seemed to understand the electorate and how to win in 2016, obviously using some of his darkest, most cynical impulses to win the election, he doesn't seem to have any sense of what's happening in the country right now, as David said. And Gene Robinson, if you just look at where the country is moving right now, the president has always counted on saying something outrageous and letting his people fall in behind him, because he said it. But now you have Republican senators saying, no, actually, we should rename these bases that are named for Confederate soldiers. Yeah, actually, no, the statue of Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee on Monument Avenue in Richmond, Virginia, probably should come down. You have military leaders saying, no, that photo op where you use the military and cleared a plaza to go hold up a Bible, that wasn't such a great idea. There's a new Yahoo poll out yesterday, Gene, that showed 52% of Americans now support NFL players' right to kneel for the national anthem. In 2016, when Colin Kaepernick did it, that number was 28% that supported him. There's something happening in the country right now that is undeniable, and the president is flat-footed on it.
He's more than flat-footed. He's totally clueless. We have to look at the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. This is just who he is. It's not an accident that he's using fascist language. It's just not. If he were running to be president of the Confederate States of America, he'd be doing okay, because only really angry white guys would be eligible to vote, and that's, he seems to want to, old white guys. He seems to want to reduce his constituency to that, and it's not, of course, three-dimensional chess. It's not some deep feel for the American electorate. It's that this is who we have as president of the United States. No, we can't remember a president talking about violence against law-abiding Americans in the way that he talked about that, a knife through butter. No, we've never heard that because it's nobody's ever done that. Nobody's ever spoken that way. This is a deeply aberrant president in every sense of the word, and he is so out of touch with the country. He's made a Sherman-like statement about the bases, for example. He came out, we will never consider renaming the bases, and now his own party is moving in that direction. Yet he basically can't. He's already ruled it out for all time. I mean, how is that smart politics? There's nothing smart about it. It's crazy and awful, and maybe it will soon be over.
All right, a lot more to get to, if you can believe it. Coming up, at least one major U.S. city is preparing to reimpose lockdown orders following a new spike in coronavirus cases. We'll have that and much more straight ahead.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.